about a decade ago, I got a call that my grandmother was dying. And I lived in Colorado, and she lived in Texas. And they said, it's too late. She's really already gone. And she's incoherent. She won't know that you've come. And I just felt this like desire rising in me. It was clear as a bell. And I could feel myself getting on the plane. And so I went anyway. And when I walked in her room, it was a hospital room, and it was so quiet. And she was in a twin bed, and she was covered in white, and there was a window. There was a little light coming in. And I walked over to her, and I had no idea what was going to happen. And I kneeled down, and I said, "Granny?" And she turned her face towards me, and she reached out her hand, and she said, "You came." And over the next few days, we had a chance to have some really sweet moments together. That kind of desire is precious. And sometimes we follow it, and sometimes we don't. And I don't know about you growing up, but for me, I was pointed away from that a lot by my family and by the culture, not because they were doing anything punishing, but they just wanted, like what Chantal talked about, let's go to the certain and to the rational. And so when it came to picking my career, that's what I did. As Chantal said, I was a CPA and a software developer. And I felt very little of that desire. And I'm sitting there debugging code, but every once in a while I would get a glimpse of it. And one day I'm debugging code, and my manager comes in and says, "Hey, we need somebody to lead a focus group." And I was like, I want to do that. What's that? Do I get to ask people questions? Like I get to talk to the users and ask them about their feelings? That sounds awesome. And then I realized I want to feel that way at work all the time. So cut to 20 years later. I didn't have a word for that then, but I have a word for it now. And the best words that I have found to describe how I felt when I was running those focus groups is native genius. And really simply said, it's the intersection between what you're really good at and also what you love doing. It's that sweet spot. And no matter if we already love our work, or we feel like we're in the total wrong job and we wish we could get out of it, or we're somewhere in between, I think we all want to feel in that sweet spot more. And this gesture, it's like we know that something else is moving through us. So I've developed this method, the Native Genius method, that uses multiple disciplines. So psychology and wisdom traditions and mindfulness and leadership. And it's also uses some of the most recent research about business performance and also the psychology of long-term behavior change. So I want to share some of these practices with you tonight. They're very action-based, and there's something that you can apply in your life right now. So I want to take a quick poll. I want to understand of people who are in the room, and just being really honest, so I'm going to ask for 3 categories. If you feel like I really love my work and I'm in the total right place, and I feel what you felt when you were running a focus group a lot, that's one category. The other categories are somewhere in between, and the other one is I feel like I'm in the total wrong job. So let's start with the first one. You feel like you're totally in your right work. Okay, wow, that is so awesome. How do I get to be one of them? Right, okay, and then who feels like they're kind of in the middle? Okay, so a fair amount in the middle. And then who feels like I'm in the total wrong place right now? Yeah, some people, okay, yeah. All right, well, so the things I'm gonna be sharing with you, some will probably feel familiar, and you may feel like, oh yeah, I've done that from time to time. And now you can take these things and do them more deliberately. So, what does that mean? Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Awesome, I'm right on time. Yeah, I'm never on time. Okay, so native genius, I think of many ways to describe it. One particular frame that I want to share with you tonight is this idea that your nothings are your somethings. Your nothings are your somethings. So native genius is bite-sized actions that you do that you can't not do. And we could pretty much put you anywhere and you'd be doing these things. So for me, I love asking people soul-searching questions. And you can pretty much put me anywhere and I will be doing this. Sitting next to somebody on a plane, in a talk like this, in a sales meeting, I can't not do it. And my family will say, they're on the live stream, maybe, hi. And they'll say, she always did that. John, one of my clients, he streamlines processes wherever he goes. And that's just one of the bite-sized actions that he does. Native Genius is a collection of these bite-sized actions that you can't not do. And so when John was 16, he worked in a restaurant and he was operating the coat check. And so he would have to run the coats from the reception all the way to the back, and he wanted to streamline this. How can I make it faster? How can I make it tighter? And as a dad, John will get his kids up and breakfast and out the doors. He streamlines that process. And on the e-commerce site that he works on, he's always streamlining the process for his customers. So the last example I want to give you of these bite-sized actions is Jane Goodall. Do you know Jane Goodall? Yeah. So British scientist who studied chimpanzees in Africa and really changed what we know about animal and human behavior by doing that. When she was 8 years old, she sat in a chicken coop for 5 hours and just watched the animals. And she also used to love to climb trees and just sit there for hours and read books. So these were her nothings that became something after she did them over and over and over again. So many of you might be thinking, okay, I get it, and I kind of do have a sense of some bite-sized actions that I do that I can't not do. Do you guys have a sense of some of those things? So if you don't, if you're sort of in the middle, or you feel like you're in the wrong place, or you want to more predictably find more of those, you can look at some things that you do at work or in a work type situation, so you're actively doing something. You might be volunteering or parenting, and ask yourself, what was your favorite thing of the thing that you were doing? So a client of mine, Renee, I was asking her this question, and her team was asking her this question. So she referred to a meeting that she was facilitating, and she said, well, my favorite thing was when I anticipated people's needs, and it was a crisis situation, so I really wanted to calm them down so that they could be more resourceful and we could like get on the same page and move forward together. And I said, okay, great, what would you call that little bite-sized action if you just gave it a name? And she said, I call it, well, I was like calm and move along. And then she said, oh my gosh, I just did calm and move along last week with my nephew when he didn't get into the school that he wanted to get into. And one of her colleagues looked at her and said, Renee, remember 2 months ago you did calm and move along when we were in that meeting with product? And the room was just silent. And there was this sense that we were in the presence of something that was so deeply her. And you know, we all want to have that sense of love and belonging for who we deeply are. And Native Genius allows us to see ourselves for who we deeply are. So there's a couple, if you have a bite-sized action, there's a couple of tests you can do. There's actually 4 that you can do to feel like, is this really my native genius? One is that you feel eager to do it. So a client of mine, Gina, she does statistical modeling, and when she goes into work in the morning, she says, this place, it's like a big tech company, and she says, this place is a paradise when it comes to data. And another kind of like test is that it feels inconsequential to you, but valuable to other people. So this client who does the statistical modeling, in the first 18 months of her role, she created a model that is saving her company $25 million a year. And when you ask her about it, she goes, oh, well, that, I mean, it's pretty trivial, actually. Anybody could have done it. So if you feel like these nothing things are nothing, then you're probably on the right track. And then the next one is that they feel like they're going to lead to nothing. So your rational mind and the mind that wants certainty cannot predict where they will go. And then the last one is that you like being thanked. So, you know what, if somebody thanks me for cooking a nice meal, I'm like, well, you're welcome. But if somebody thanks me for asking a deep question, I'm like, I just love it, because it feels like that's my special medicine for the world. Okay, so once you have this bite-sized action, then what? The most important thing, so let's go back to Renee, who had calm and move along. The most important thing is not like, oh, now I'm going to figure out how that is my passion or my purpose, because that can be paralyzing. So the most important thing is to just freaking use it, however you can. So Renee just was like, okay, how can I use this? I'm mentoring a friend, calm and move along. She goes into a meeting, calm and move along, is that needed here? And then she also talked to her manager and said, hey, I've used this in a couple situations, and I noticed that we got on track really well afterwards. I like doing this. I think I add value in this way. And the manager was like, you know what, you're right. I'm going to think about this. And she actually made the request as well, like, if something like this comes along, I'd really like to be involved. And her manager was like, thank you. So, what we know also, the wisdom traditions tell us when we're in this intersection between what we love and what we're really good at, is that we will be rewarded. Not only that, but that we are the reward. And now, over the last 20 years, the business research echoes all of this. So what we know about Renee, if she's using that native genius once a day at work, she's 3 times as likely to be healthy and thriving in her life. And she's going to be more productive, more innovative, more seen as a leader, so she's going to be more promoted. And if the teams are running off of this, then we know it translates all the way down to revenue and earnings per share. So we know it matters. We know. And it really requires us to follow things that we don't know where it's going to go. And so I hope, let me think if there's anything else I wanted to say before I wrap up. Yes. Boom shakalaka. This is really important. I'm so glad I stood there in silence not knowing. Okay, so, okay, this work really, really amplifies when you talk to other people about it. I can't say that enough. Because you know what, as much as our natural desire is rising, what's pushing it down? Vulnerability, fear, over-analysis. I get scared all the time to use my native genius. I'm like the worst native genius student ever. I need so much help I can't even tell you. So People who come up to me like 6 months after I've done a talk or a workshop or something like that, and they're like wide-eyed and they're saying, "You won't believe what happened." And I say, "What?" And the key of like what kept their work sticky is that they just talked to somebody about this thing, Native Genius. Maybe they started and just said, "Okay, you and me, let's check in for 10 minutes in the next 2 weeks." We don't know what's going to happen after that, but they just give their attention to it, and it creates a cascade of actions. So it's like one small, tiny thing that you can do that will lead to other things. So remember that your nothings are your somethings. And this desire, when you follow it in your bite-sized actions, I hope what you'll feel is that your native genius is meeting you there on the other side saying, "You came." Thank you.